Happy Sabbath, everyone. Morning and happy Sabbath. All right, let's see that smile on your face. And if you don't want to, you don't have to, but in God's house, on this happy Sabbath where we can rest in His presence and also connect with one another. Turn to the person next to you and just give him or her the biggest smile on your face. Say, I love you. In Jesus Christ. I hope church is a place where it generates a lot of our authentic and genuine smiles for one another. Really, I don't know, back in the 90s there was this series called Chicken Soup for the Soul. How many of you guys actually know Chicken Soup for the Soul? Man, that's like maybe 20% of you. All right, awesome. And there were some really heartwarming, amazing stories in this book. But I mean, all throughout the 90s and even through, I guess, the earlier years. Testing? Testing? Just use one of these. Yeah, all throughout these stories, there's always a part where a person is intentional about brightening someone else's day. And I vividly remember a story about a person who was literally about to crumble and break down and even maybe thinking about suicide. And he goes into the bank, and the bank teller that's sitting right across from him, she gives him the biggest smile and says, "How you doing?" And at that moment, he said that he found a reason to. Just because of one smile from a bank teller. He went on to tell her that, "Hey, you have no idea what you just did. You gave me hope for this life. Thank you for your smile." And that story was in one of the Chicken Soup for the Soul. It warmed my heart. I'm sure it warmed a lot of people's hearts. But nowadays, after the 9/11, after I came back to the States, it's not the chicken soup states anymore. There's something else going on in the United States. And not that many people are smiling. And it's not as friendly as it used to be. It used to be that people literally, if you knew them or not, say hi, and you engage in a conversation, you shake their hands, you ask them about their family, what they do, and this was a natural exchange that used to happen. But now, you kind of keep your face straight. Don't want to look like a person who smiles. You kind of go through life not wanting to smile, not wanting to be vulnerable, and you don't expose yourself, and you kind of remain cool, calm, and straight-faced. And I just think we need to really return to the genuine and authentic life where you really just put yourself out there and love people, brighten each other's day, and warm each other's hearts. And I hope that's what this church is about. You're not worried about keeping your reputation. You're not worried about what other people might think, but you are genuinely loving people and just smile. And just brightening someone else's day. I hope that's our story together. I just want to thank Jesse for the amazing song, the special music, and also Juliet. It was her first time to have that children's story. Props, awesome. And we're going to welcome Tyler Huang for the first time to Atlanta. We have naturally added one more member to our church. Yes, natural church growth is awesome too. We have 2 more coming up until March. And the natural reproduction and the be fruitful and multiply, that command still stands. And for those of you who are not married, you need to get married and have kids and grow this church. All right, let's ahead and dive into our message for this morning. I've actually entitled this message called The Ultimate Comeback. And this is a second part series to the vision casting that we're doing as a family together. And we all love comeback stories. Especially in a game of football, right? You're losing, you're down by 9, it's the fourth quarter, you have about 3 minutes on the clock, and you miraculously have that turnover, you run and you have that touchdown, and you actually get it back with another turnover, and you move down the field, and you kick that field goal, and it's good, and you win by 1, you're like, no way! We all love comeback stories. Or in the game of basketball, the people that hit that last buzzer shot, right? About 3 seconds left on the clock, give it to Jordan, and you just see that ball, slow motion. And it hits nothing but the net, everyone just goes crazy. Because you were down by like 20, and in the fourth quarter alone, you scored like 21 and you win. Comeback stories. We also love stories about people who have, who have been given a terminal, diagnosis. That you have 3 months to live. And this person goes on to beat cancer and lives to be 60, 70, or 80 years old. Lives a long life. We also love stories that kind of like, I don't know if you seeing the story of the person who had the amputated leg, who actually went on to win the gold medal in one of the Olympics and set a record. I mean, the comeback stories. When you're almost down and out, when everyone thinks it's over, when you believe that it's over, somehow, in some way, there's this comeback and a victory. I don't know if you remember, but back in January 12, 2010, there was a huge earthquake in the nation called Haiti. And if you were following the news, you would have actually seen this father and daughter on the cover of Time, or I think it was either Time or Newsweek magazine. And what just happened to this father was nothing short of a tragic loss, because due to this earthquake, he lost his wife and one of his daughters. And one of his daughter was actually under a pile of rubble. They couldn't get her out until they had to amputate her arm. So in just one day, in a split moment, he lost his wife, his daughter, and one of his daughter's arms. Imagine if you were in that situation. What would be going through your mind? It's over. You lost your house, everything's gone, destroyed, you lost your family, the only daughter you have, she loses her arm, and you're like, what in the world? How can I go on and move on and live this life? And you're going through this turmoil, you don't know whether to keep living, you don't know how you're going to survive. It was at that critical point of juncture, at that point of time, where there was a person here right in Atlanta. He saw this story and this news, and his story was picked up because one of the reporters actually caught him and had him tell a story, and then he told the story, and one of the people here in Atlanta saw that story. And he said there was something that arose within him, a passion and a compassion for this particular father. He wanted to do something, and he did everything he could. He called all the news network stations to connect with that father. And he raised money so that they can actually re-immigrate to the States. He also raised money, about $22,000 for the girl, for her to receive an education. And they immigrated to Miami. They bought him a used Camry and a place that they could live in, and gave that person a new life, a stage for a comeback. Do you know why I know this story? Because the person who actually saw this story from Atlanta is actually a pastor in this church. Or not at this church, but in one of the churches in Atlanta. He's not an Adventist, but he's one of the pastors here in Atlanta. He saw that story, he couldn't just sit there, and he said, I'm going to be an agent, a change agent that brings one of the greatest comebacks. for this person who just basically lost everything. And I'm just wondering, isn't that why we exist as a church? To provide that comeback for people. We're not here to judge people because they messed up and they're down and out and they're almost in this thing. What's wrong with you? Why are you living that way? This is not what we're about. We're not about judging people and condemning them and saying, why are you living such a life? We're all about, hey, even though you're there, I feel you, I empathize with you, and I believe that God can grant you the greatest comeback, and I'm right here for you. This is the story that we are to create together as family. This is the vision of our church, to provide that comeback. Many Bible characters in the Bible have a comeback story. I don't know if you remember the story of Moses. Moses actually killed an Egyptian, thinking that he was doing God's will, and then everyone kind of turned on him. He ran for his life, and he was in the middle of the desert. He thought his life was over, and he spent about 40 years in the desert. We talked about how Jethro picked him up and gave him that kind of life there in the wilderness. But after 40 years in the wilderness, he thought, this is how he's going to die. He's never going to see the light of day. He's going to stay in the desert. He's going to live this normal, ordinary life. But God did not forget Moses. God didn't forget Moses. Instead, God fetched him, made him come back, and made him a deliverer. Imagine the comeback story for Moses. From a murderer, to a fugitive, to a no man in no man's land and desert, to the deliverer of God's people. And he's the one that faced God, face to face on top of Mount Sinai, and he was the meekest person alive. From a murderer to the meekest person alive who faced God himself. That is a major comeback. God is in the business of giving us that spiritual and physical comeback for all of us. He's interested in giving us that story for us. And we as His church need to have His heart and also give these opportunities of comeback stories for others. Oftentimes, our circumstances in life are very dark, but God is light. He makes us come back. He gives us a fresh new start. He makes us as a new creation. He never gets tired of us coming back to Him for help. He delights when we do come back to Him, asking for a comeback. And we're going to actually enter into one of the most beautiful comeback stories in the Bible. But before we do that, I'm going to reiterate one of the experiences that I had this week. I met certain, a few individuals that were going through some things in life. And they've been out of the picture, out of the church scene for a while. At least 10, 12, 13 years. Growing up in the church, all they saw was just church splits, politics, hypocrisy, parents' double-facedness. When they were in church, they were completely different people than when they were out of church. He kind of gave up the whole thing. He went up to just live his life. And this girl, she also did the same thing. She rejected God, rejected the church, kind of wanted to just live her own, do her own thing and live her life. And throughout the last 10, 12, 13 years, life alone out there, without God, without church, without any support or network or system. They went through many different things in life that I can't really reiterate for you right now. A lot of issues. Now, one of the people that I met was on the brink of despair, wanting to see if there was really hope, if there was any point in continuing this life. He didn't know how to resolve and come to terms with what he was going through. And as I was hearing this story, when I was listening to this story, when I was meeting this person and these individuals, what kept on coming back to my mind is there are so many people out there that's longing for a comeback. I know each and every one of you have at least one person in your mind that needs to come back. And that needs a comeback. We're all busy. We're living our life. We're making a living. But the mission that God gives us as individuals every day is to provide a comeback story for one person that we know that needs it. And I'm going to go through a story of how Jesus did that, even as he was dying. Let's open our Bibles to Luke chapter 23, verses 32 and 33. Luke 23, 32 and 33. I didn't provide a PowerPoint, but because I really wanted us to open and read for ourselves. In Luke chapter 23, verse 32 and 33. The story picks up. Two other men, both criminals, were also led out with Jesus to be executed. When they came to the place called Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right and the other on his left. If you're getting this picture, the last few hours of Jesus' life on earth was spent with who? With two criminals. Two criminals that committed something that made them deserve capital punishment. Two people that hit rock bottom. Two people that were on death row. Two people that knew that was over. We don't know too much about these guys. They are known as thieves, but we have no idea what they stole or how much. But we got to kind of connect the dots and say a stealing and capital punishment. It doesn't really make sense. Well, so there's actually a backstory to the story that we don't know about. But they're criminals that are spending the last few moments of life with Jesus on each of their crosses. They were now on a hill called Golgotha, the place known as the Skull. This was actually a place that is known as, this landfill, filled with so much garbage and trash and flies buzzing around, just stinking, rotting things. No one wanted to be there, and they were on that hill on Golgotha, known as the Skull, with Jesus. And as we go throughout the story, one of the thieves decides to use his last words to insult and taunt Jesus. We know that he's been through a lot, and he's been through a lot of issues, and there's so much hate in him because a normal person who is about to die do not use their last words to insult me. I have yet to meet a person who is about to die that begins to just curse and insult and taunt people all around them. Usually when you're on deathbed, when you're about to die, you do everything in your power to ask forgiveness or to forgive others. You make amends. You don't insult and taunt and curse and point fingers at other people. But this person, he was filled with so much hatred in his life and so much pain in his life, so that he chooses the last words out of his mouth to inflict as much pain to another individual before he dies. Very tragic, but this was the reality of this one thief on the cross. And to get to a picture of how they would even speak to each other on a cross is this. When you're hanging on a cross, you're literally, the spiked nails are on your hands and your feet, right? And you're literally hanging there on the cross. And what happens is, because you're hanging just by the nails, you begin to sag. Your chest begins to sag low and down. And this causes so much pressure on your lungs. And you can't breathe. So what you do, in order to breathe, you have to push yourself against the nail that is in your foot. You have to literally push against the nail. Imagine the nail is in you, and you have to push against the nail to come up, back up. You come back up, and you finally breathe again. And that's when you have the moment to talk, right? Your chest sags again. You push yourself up again. and then you can talk, okay? And this is a guy in pain. This thief is in pain, not just literally, but mentally, physically, and also spiritually. He's in so much pain, and he doesn't know how to deal with his pain. So whenever he inflicts on his pain, he comes up and he starts cussing and taunting and insulting Jesus. This is the picture. 3 men on the cross, all gasping for air, gasping for words. And one of the thieves, what is he doing? He's using his last words to do some insulting. And this is what I want to actually get out. Hurt people hurt people. Did you guys get that? People that have been hurt usually hurt people. And the more you hurt people who hurt people, you're going to end up having another person who even hurts more people. So the only way to deal with people who hurt people isn't to hurt them, it's to heal them. What people who cause the greatest injury in life, what they need is not just another person who's being all judgmental and righteous about and holier than thou, that type of thing. Especially any young adults that are going through life, they have so much pain and they can't help but drink. Because that's the only way they know how to relieve their stress and somehow cope through life. You don't go there pointing fingers and stop drinking. What are you thinking? Are you crazy? This is not what you're supposed to do to a person who is hurting and drinking and intoxicating themselves through life. What you need to do is you need to go to that person and love them and bring about healing in their life so that they don't have to use alcohol to go through life. But oftentimes, as church people, what do we do with hurt people? We even hurt them even more. Right? You're not supposed to dress that way in church. You're not supposed to sing that, and you're not supposed to. We do so many of this, and people come, and the hurt people come to church, and they get even more hurt, and then they eventually decide to leave the church. But the only way to end hurt is to bring about healing. And this is what Jesus was trying to do. Alright. So, imagine the thieves. They're absolutely tired and exhausted. Imagine, Jesus actually took 39 lashes already. He lost so much blood. The crown of thorns on his head, literally crushing his skull. He's constantly bleeding. I want us to actually get this picture. I was meditating on this week and I just started bawling because Jesus, when he was actually crushed with the thorns, when he was losing blood, when he was actually feeling all kinds of pain in his body, the only thing that he could think of was to save a thief. Even in the most tragic of circumstances, here was Jesus wanting to create a comeback story to another thief. But I want us to picture that scene. Jesus is in the middle, and he's just as much as in pain as these other guys. Even more, because the sin of the world is upon him. His heart is literally crushed with all the guilt of the world. It is at this point, he's being insulted by this guy that is filled with so much pain. I want us to have that picture, okay? He has only a few breaths left. Jesus has only a few breaths left. And Jesus is just taking this. He's not retaliating. He's not saying anything bad. And he's praying for his people. And he's just barely struggling to breathe. And the other thief on the left, right? Or you don't know which side he was on the other side. Let's go to Luke 23, verse 40 and 41. Luke chapter 23, verse 40 and 41. The other thief on the other side, the other thieves rebuked the other thief, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? and we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. So the other thief is listening to us, he's in pain, but he's listening to this other thief insult Jesus, and he's like, man, this is not right, I need to do something. He comes up, gasps for breath, and he says, hey, what are you even doing? We deserve this, but this man doesn't deserve anything. And I'm sure there was some more dialogue that happened. There was more conversation that ensued. I want to actually learn what that conversation was about. But we have, up until this point, this dialogue. And then as soon as he says that, this other thief on the other side, as soon as he finishes talking to that thief, and before he comes back down, he says, Jesus. And this is Luke chapter 23, verse 42. He says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. This is a 9-word prayer. This could have been his only prayer in life. This thief was at the end of his rope, and he chooses his words wisely. He says, Jesus, please remember me. Jesus, please remember me. This is the ultimate comeback prayer. It doesn't matter where we're in life. Wherever we're in life, we need Jesus to remember us. And when God remembers us, a lot of amazing things begin to happen. Now, in the Old Testament, whenever God remembered people, especially women, guess what happened? Their womb was open and they were able to have children. So people who have been infertile, who have not been able to have kids, when God remembered a woman or a lady, miraculously that lady's womb opened and they gave birth to a child. The miracle of birth, a life creation, happens when God remembers. There's a new life that is birthed, literally, when God remembers. When you're at the end of your rope, when you're thinking you're in despair, and you don't have anyone to turn to, you don't know what your life is going to be all about, and you're looking at your life, it's so boring, it's monotonous, it's routine, you don't know what's going to happen with your life. You don't want to live the rest of your life like this, but you say, Jesus, please remember me. And when God chooses to remember us, new life is birthed through us and in us. In Genesis 8:1, God remembers Noah, and then what happens? The waters begins to subside. What if God didn't remember? What would happen? We wouldn't be here. God remembered Noah and the ark and his family with all the animals there. He remembers them, and the waters begin to subside, and they get out and they, offer that altar, and then God gives that rainbow, and ever since then, this world has never been destroyed by water. In Genesis 19:29, God remembers Abraham and therefore saves Lot from Sodom and Gomorrah. One of Abraham's relatives, his nephew, he is saved because God remembers Abraham. Remember, if you are faithful to God and God decides to remember you, you can perhaps be a salvation for someone in your family. Lot was only saved because of Abraham, and only because God remembered Abraham. There is a person that you can save if God remembers you, if you live the kind of life like Abraham. And in Psalm 105, verse 8, we see that God remembers His covenant that He makes with His people. Therefore, we're not consumed. If God did not remember the covenant that He made with us, then we would be dead immediately. All of us would be just dead, perished. But He remembers His covenant, and we're not consumed. In Isaiah 49, verse 15 and 16, this is the ultimate promise from God. And I want all of us to go there right now. Isaiah 49, 15 and 16. You know this verse. You've heard it. And you've heard many pastors preach about it. But I want us to actually go to the Bible and read this for ourselves. Isaiah 49, verse 15 and 16. If you're there, please say amen. Amen. All right, let's go and read this. Can a woman forget her nursing child and have no compassion on the son of her womb? Even these may forget, but I, what does it say? I will not forget you. Behold, I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. God says, even though everyone on earth can forget you, even your mom can forget you, but I, as for me, I, the one that created you, I will never forget you. And if you ask me in prayer, Jesus, please remember me, even though you've been a thief all your life, even though you did not do one thing right, even though you have got yourself in that situation by your sins, if you did say that prayer, I will remember you. It's never too late with God. Because even your family might desert you and abandon you, but God says, I will not forget. And the thief on this side, he just took up on that promise. He probably maybe remembered, all right, God never forgets me, and he says, the only prayer he prayed on that cross is, Jesus, please remember. So I want you to never forget this prayer. And remember to remember God's promise that he will never forget us, right? And this thief on the cross remembered to remember, and he chose to remember God's covenant. He chose to remember God's promise. He was not worthy. He lived a life full of regrets, and he was about to die, but he wasn't going to let all of that stop him from praying the prayer. Jesus, please remember me. And guess what Jesus said? The unthinkable happened. This is Luke chapter 23, verse 43. Luke chapter 23, verse 43. Jesus answered him. This is the most amazing promises in the Bible. The most amazing reply that Jesus gave to anyone. And he's talking to this thief. Jesus struggles once again. He hears this prayer, and Jesus cannot just sit still. He props him back up. He gasps for air. The blood is flowing. He's filled and drenched with blood. And he is in so much pain, right? And he listens to this plea, this cry for mercy. And Jesus gets up there and he says, truly, I tell you today, you will be with me in paradise. I know exactly what you did. I know what got you here. And I know the kind of life you lived. But because you have put your trust in me, because you said, remember me, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have you come with me and be with me in paradise. And no doubt, when we go to heaven, what are we going to see? We're going to see that thief on the cross. And I'm sure he's going to be singing the loudest praise to Jesus. He's going to be like, holy, 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 Lord, worthy is the Lamb. He's going to be the one that's probably trying to out-sing and out-cry anyone, because he knows, for one, that he is not worthy to be there. And it was only by the sheer grace of God that he was able to be in paradise with Jesus. You know, this is the grace of God. The ultimate comeback. Just as he was about to die, he prays that prayer, and Jesus takes him. And he will resurrect him. Imagine. When Jesus comes again, you know how it's going to happen, right? When the archangel, the heavenly host is going to come, and he's going to call out the names of the people that are in the graves, right? And Jesus is going to call whose name? That thief's name. And let's say that thief's name was, let's say Justin, right? Because I'm kind of like that thief. But Justin! And that thief who's lived a life that was deserving of a capital punishment, he's going to listen to Jesus' voice, and those who are alive will see this thief rise be lifted to Jesus. Can you imagine? Can you picture that? Doesn't that kind of really just evoke so much emotion? Because God's passion for a single soul knows no bounds. It goes the distance. And we cannot, as a church, forget this. Okay? There are many people who used to be with us in our youth groups and that have left. And they are seeking for a community that will remember them. Interesting, right? This was the latest survey that was done by the General Conference of the Seventh Adventists, right? Many people who left the church, out of 10 people, right? Only 1 out of 10 people received any kind of follow-up call from the church. So the other 9, when they left the church, no one really cared. No one knew they were gone, and they just kind of disappeared into history, and they've been just out ever since. There's only 10% rate for Adventists to remember people that have left us. And I want us to actually go back and climb up that percentage rate and try to remember as many people who have left us. In the Atlanta area, back in the, 2000s or even the 90s, there were youth groups under the leadership of, what's his face, Douglas Nah. I'm sure there was a lot of youth group in United, also here with whoever it was that was leading here. There's a lot of people, high school kids, back then, there was a lot of people that were in church. But we don't see them anymore. We don't know where they are. We don't even know their names. Right? And it's time for us to remember them. Remember them and pray for them and do everything we can to help them come back and make the ultimate come back. Are we together on that? This is what we're all about. This is what I came. And more as I'm trying to interact with people, it's becoming more apparent and necessary that we need to devote all of our energies and passion into people who needs that comeback, who needs to remember. Because as long as we are focused on ourselves and in ourselves, there is no future for us. This is not a country club, just us being about us. Okay? This is all about being a missional church that dares to remember people who may have been forgotten. And I hope we have that clear mission and vision in our minds. We at the Atlanta Korean Seventh-day Adventist Church want to be known as the community that remembers. We want to help people pray the prayer of this thief on the cross. Sometimes we just think that it's so much cooler to just leave them be. We don't want to be annoying or freaky. Sometimes we talk about this, right? We go to some of our friends who is no longer interested in religion or God, and if we bring up God, and they're going to be like, and we fear that the response that we'll get is, man, you're being a Jesus freak again. You're being dorky, you're being annoying, so please stop. We think that's what's going to happen. But it's not about being freaky or annoying. It's about deeply caring for them and praying for them and waiting for the right moment to introduce that invitation back. And I hope we can grasp that chance that we will continue to remain in close relationship with people who are not here. And dare to extend that invite whenever we get the chance to. And in the future, we want to create more events and gatherings that is targeted for people who can come back in a non-threatening, non-coercive environment where they can learn about Jesus. So when we invite them to church, they will view the church as a place where there's this free dialogue and conversation and friendship and warmth, right? We want this to be a church that provides as many events or activities or programs that is invitable. for anyone who has just checked out. And in the upcoming year, with the new set of leadership that will be, selected, and we're going to have that church business session next week. But we want to be very intentional about this vision, this purpose, about reconnecting, remembering, and re-inviting, and have them come back and make the ultimate comeback. I'll tell you one more story from the Bible and we'll wrap up. There was this story in Luke chapter 8. It's a story of a little girl who became very sick. And the parents were frantic because she was getting more sick day by day, and they were trying to find Jesus. They were seeking Jesus, and finally they found him. The father found him. And Jesus was on his way with his father, but by the time Jesus arrived, what happened to the little girl? The little girl was dead. And they thought it was over. The girl's dead. I mean, what else can you do? We tried everything. We tried to bring Jesus. And when everyone thought that it was over, Jesus did not think that it was over. Can you imagine? And Jesus went inside the house, he made it close all the doors, and he went to the little girl. He sat by the bed, and she was lying down, and she said, "Get up." Hali dago. That's what he said in Aramaic, right? Hali dago. Get up, little girl. And when Jesus said, "Get up," what happened? She got up. Said, "Hi, Jesus." And everyone was like, "Wow, what just happened?" When everyone thought it was over, Jesus thought different. When we think it's over, God does not think that it's over. Even when someone's dead, what can God do? He can resurrect them. Our human intuition and our logical thought process, it can take us only so far. And we make the calculations and we think, "Oh man, at this rate, I'm never going to change. I'm always going to be like this. Our family will always be in shambles. We will always argue. We'll never get along. We'll never be able to restore my relationship with my father. My mom's going to be always that way." And so on. We kind of put a, death diagnosis to all of our relationships, right? Even in the Korean American church, in the Korean family context, there is so many family issues, right? And we think it's over. We just have to live on, move on. And when we think that it's over, Jesus says it's not. I can resurrect and heal and restore broken relationships. I can make that relationship between you and your father work out. I can actually restore that relationship between you and your brother, and your mother, and your sister, and your aunt. And I hope we can get the vision that Jesus has. And everyone was like, "Wow, this girl rose from the dead." And the paid mourners were like, "We're not getting paid today." Jesus was not too late, but he was right on time, because Jesus is the God who makes the comeback from death to life possible. And there's countless stories in the Bible. A shady man, a tax collector, Zacchaeus, everyone gave up on him. He was a cheater, he was a fraud, he was a stealer, he was someone that everyone disliked. No one thought he could ever actually come back to a sane living. But who thought different? While everyone was avoiding him, while everyone just gave up on him, Jesus stopped right there in the sycamore tree. He looked up and he said, "I'm coming to your house because you're not over." And he gave that second and third and fourth and fifth chance. And Zacchaeus came back. He made the ultimate comeback. He paid 4 times as much Imagine if you're one of the persons that was ripped off by Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus comes up one day and gives you 4 times as much. What are you going to do? This is what you're going to do. By the time that he made all his payments back, he was probably the most beloved tax collector in downtown. He no longer cheated anyone. He paid everyone back. And he made peace with God. He made the ultimate comeback. He was no longer a shady tax collector. He was one of the guys that everyone began to love. That's the comeback story that Jesus allows for anyone who desires to say, Jesus, please remember me. For those of you who have any addictions that you can't overcome, right? Any addiction, I don't care what it is, and you think it's over, I'll be addicted for life, I'll be living like this for life, I will always be this way, this is my personality, I'm just human, this is something that you're saying to yourself. Jesus thinks otherwise. He's saying, it's not over. Look at Zacchaeus, look at that little girl, I can do the same thing in your life. I can resurrect you from the dead. And this is the power of the gospel that needs to be reignited in our souls. This is what we need to start believing with all of our hearts. And when we do that, we become the church that provides the ultimate comeback. We look at people with different eyes. We don't think of them as, not so. We don't do that anymore. We say, oh, there's still hope. There's still hope. We still dare to hope. And we persevere. And we continue to work and work and work on loving these people and praying for them. And God remembers. And everything is history. From that moment on, even though you had a reputation like Zacchaeus, maybe you have a reputation of being the gossip, right? You gossip in church and you destroy people's lives, and no one tells you anything anymore, and no one wants to even come close to you because they know you as a gossip. But you begin to say, God, please remember me. I don't want to gossip anymore. Change my mouth, my heart, my mind. Help me not gossip. And God remembers you and transforms you, and out of your mouth, no longer gossip comes out. What comes out? Words that bring life. Words of encouragement and hope and faith. And I hope this is a vision that we can catch today. That we become a church that provides this ultimate comeback for people who need it the most. Because Jesus, when he looks at us, he says it's not over. He says, I'm just getting started. I'm going to invite the people for the closing hymn to come up. And once again, as they're coming up, and as we're getting ready for our closing hymn, I want us to just kind of close our eyes wherever we're. And I want to give you a chance to just reflect and say your prayer to Jesus. I don't know what your story is this morning. I don't know the kind of week that you had. I don't know what you're going through. But Jesus does, and we need to talk. And just simply that prayer. Pray that prayer. Jesus, remember. And let's go ahead and take the time to do that. For the next 30 to 60 seconds. Wherever you are, just sit, close your eyes. And ask God to remember me. And lay out before me everything that's on your heart. And receive His rest. very tempting for us to speak words that give death instead of life. And we see you with that little girl speaking words of life. And you resurrect her from life. Lord, we pray that you will speak those words of life to us this morning. And also to the friends and family of ours that need to hear those words. Help us to be the messengers of life-giving words, Lord. Help us to never give up on our dear, beloved family members, and also our friends and our colleagues and our classmates. Whoever they might be, help us to continue to speak words of life and become agents that provide the greatest comeback. And throughout this silent hour, all throughout the day, may we be in the business of encouraging one another, providing the comeback for each other. We pray this in Jesus' name.